Hi, friends. Welcome to the Living Truth Podcast. This is Kristin Cary, kicking us off for a part 2 of a conversation that we started in the previous episode. And Michael and I are diving into our own personal experience with the young, tender, protective parts of us and how that shows up in marriage. We've touched a lot in the first episode about what happens after betrayal and that dance between needing space and boundaries, but also needing closeness for the betrayed partner. We also went into all the protective reactions that the addict often has in the wake of betrayal. So you're going to want to go back and listen to that episode. But I do believe if you're tuning into this episode, it could stand alone. We are talking about some really sacred, tender ground for both Michael and I as we both are continuing to recover from complex childhood trauma and have lots of issues that we still have to work through and grow and heal in, and are both taking radical responsibility for being grown-ups. Yay. So, okay, Michael, the question I want to start with is, when a betrayed partner longs for closeness one moment but needs distance the next from her spouse, how can the betraying partner understand this as a normal nervous system response to trauma rather than interpreting it as rejection? And what does it look like for him to honor her need for safety while tending to his own fear, shame, or sense of abandonment without pressuring her to reconnect before she is ready?
Right. And there is a lot there for sure,
Yes.
to say the least. So if I can let me try and unpack it piece by piece. And I'm so glad that I have that question here that I can refer to on my iPad.
It's like a 3-part question. I'm kind of
Yeah, that's great. So
I'm kind of a
we'll dive
fan,
into it.
and it's complex.
Right. So the question is, how can the betraying partner understand this as normal nervous system response rather than rejection? Okay. And so that what you mentioned earlier of when you opened on going back to the previous episode, definitely, you know what, if it's worth saying, it's worth repeating. There's some things I will repeat myself from last episode for sure, because it's necessary to continue to just keep learning this as I am learning this. The idea of unpacking these parts of us in this approach to the human being as being a multiplicity type of a person instead of monolithic. The monolithic person is thinking and feeling and doing all from one source. You know, I am one person, one being, and that just causes a lot of self-hatred and shame. But the idea of multiplicity and having multiple parts that are created throughout our life. Most of these parts are created through the idea of neglect, trauma, and abuse. And when I say, neglect and trauma, there's a lot of different variations in that too. We automatically think in terms of the worst, horrific type of things, but anything that ruptures the attachment in any way of us to our parents or primary caregivers. So divorce is traumatic. Losing a parent, death, whatever, is traumatic. So yeah, there's a huge spectrum of different feelings and how the impact of the abuse on a person. So multiple parts. I need to first understand that the rejection that I'm feeling is not from today. So if my partner needs, so in this case, like if I were to talk about you and I, Kristin, understanding this as a normal nervous system response before I dove into the multiplicity approach and understanding my parts, I would have seen it all. All I would have been able to feel was the rejection, right? Would have been, that would have felt like 90% of it was from today. And maybe I, because I was in recovery for years, 10% of it I would convince myself was from my past, but it really is flip-flopped, It's not rejection, but the distance between us may be related a little bit, 5 to 10% to just the attachment that we have that is temporarily, it's not ruptured or broken necessarily, but it's a necessary thing for self-care for each individual person. Having that differentiation where we are separate human beings, and I can let you be you, and I can let me be me. It takes a lot of understanding of how I used to take the brokenness of these parts and the feelings in unhealthy ways to you, asking you to care for that, right? So yeah, if you need space and we, to see it as normal in the feelings that I have come up, I want to pursue you and say, I can't live with that space. My parts, can't live with that space. That would have been the old thing. And so you're saying, yeah, seeing it as normal instead of rejection really is leaning into where that rejection is coming from. I can convince myself and get a lot of head knowledge to, think, okay, this is true, that it's normal. You need space. I could tell myself that 100 times, but the only thing that really helps deep down is to lean into the feeling of rejection and where that's really coming from, and tend to that part of me that feels the rejection, 100% of it. So honoring her need for safety while tending to his own fear, shame, or sense of abandonment without pressuring her to reconnect before she's ready. That can be tricky. And I want to say that it's all a process of continuing to learn and understand ourselves better, understanding the origin of these feelings, right? The pressure that I would bring to you to reconnect before you're ready is that feeling of, you called it fear and shame and different things but what I want to bring it back to, if I could name something even a little deeper and younger, would be attachment to mom, right? So, okay, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm always coming to you wanting you to be my mom. Remember, in the multiplicity approach, I'm talking about a very young part who was neglected by mom. So the space that is between, or let's say I'm as a 1-year-old, the space that's between me and mom, that attachment rupture that's there is based on survival. If mom doesn't take care of me, I'm going to die. Is the reality, and that's the truth. Someone needs to take care of this toddler or the infant, and so on. So that space between us, it's far more than fear, but it's just this uncomfortable. It's a feeling. Trying to describe it, what it really feels like is, and that pain is a discomfort on a survival level, like it's
like a primal panic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was looking for. Primal panic. That's a good thing. Like I cannot, I won't survive in that space, because as a young child, we don't have a concept of time. We don't know, okay, Mom's not here today. She'll be back tomorrow. The thinking and the feeling of this young part. And it really is, when there's abuse, neglect, different things like this, that part is frozen in time. This is how the human mind works, right? So being that, if that's true, then I have a 1-year-old part that's feeling all of this discomfort. It's intolerable. That was another thing I was trying to think of.
Yes.
The space, the feeling is survival, and it's intolerable between us. Okay. So in the addictive cycle of sexual addiction, when we're wrapped up in the addiction cycle, we don't feel that discomfort as much because we act out, we numb it, we escape, we do things that feel, the fantasy is that we're desired, that we're attached, that we're comforted, that we're nurtured. Sex feels like all of those things, right? It reminds us of all of those things, the nurture. So it replaces that temporarily, but when that acting out in that addictive cycle has caused enough pain in our lives that what's more intolerable, continuing to behave that way or dealing with what's underneath it, right? We have to get to that rock bottom where we feel like it's more intolerable to keep acting out sexually and harming our partner. So so the process is understanding that intolerable space, I am not going to die. I can care for myself. I can be my primary caregiver of my parts, that 1-year-old part, we'll say. And I can tend to that part in many ways by journaling, prayer, counseling, and even going out for an ice cream cone, doing things that are fun. It really, this really does help. It really does work. And sometimes it is a little bit of a self-discovery of understanding. Some of the stories from our past might be able to help us, like superheroes, go to see a superhero movie as long as it's doesn't have any sexual content, or whatever. So the idea is caring, learning to tend and care for that. Like you said, the fear, the shame, the sense of abandonment, that's the process of learning to tend to those feelings without pressuring her. So in other words, if I can take care of myself, the pressure to reconnect, that intolerable space decreases. I'm not going to say it's gone. That's unrealistic. Let's just be honest. It's reduced enough that I don't have to, I don't feel that urge, that desperation to reconnect, and that intolerable feeling is diminished. And so I don't have to pressure her before she's ready. I can let her have that space. And then she actually sees that this thing happening inside of her husband, let's say, he's caring for his parts. I'm sure you've probably witnessed this. That'll be a question I can ask you maybe in a minute. Yeah. Witnessing that process, like what does that look like and what does that feel like to witness that and to realize like, oh, he's taking care of that thing that used to pressure me.
It's great because I no longer feel like I have to be a mom. I can just be your wife. I can just be your best friend. And that release from that pressure has changed our relationship. It feels like two adults. Not that it didn't before, but there were just periods of time, where I'm sure I did the same thing in my own younger, tender parts towards you. But it has changed our relationship because I know that you're not going to try to ask me to take responsibility for something that I can't possibly take responsibility for.
Yeah, and even as we look at a bigger picture, we're with our audience here, we're talking about the idea of sexual betrayal or any type of betrayal and why a partner might need some space. But then, there are these times where it's not about you needing space, but it's about your parts needing tending to yourself, or maybe you're just being distracted with work and things like that, where you're wrapped up in your own self-protection pieces with that. This space between us can happen for many, many different reasons, right? This is a reality that I think couples deal with or without any type of betrayal. So, early on in sexual betrayal, but long term, this is still a thing, even when the sexual betrayal goes away, isn't it?
Oh,
Right.
Absolutely.
And when I say
the
sexual betrayal goes away, I want to say, I'm talking about after years of healing and stuff. And the sexual betrayal is not the thing that's causing all the problems in the marriage still.
Right.
This disconnect happens with couples.
Absolutely. How do you think learning to notice when a protective part has taken over, how has that changed the way we handle difficult conversations?
Yeah. Can you kick that off? What do you think about that?
Yeah. Okay, so I think a lot of times I would over-explain. If I felt like I was not talking to true core self you, like the part of you made in the image of God, but your more protective parts are front and center, then sometimes I would I'm going to try harder. I'm going to explain more. I'm going to change the way I say it so that I don't trigger you. Just kind of either tiptoeing around or over explaining, trying to solve whatever problem we were addressing. That is one way. Another way would be to make sure I really minimize any kind of asks. If there's a conflict, I'm not even gonna try to solve other problems that come up routinely in marriage, right? I'm just gonna take care of it and try to people please here to reduce the threat. Those are some of the ways that my protective parts would show up. Or avoidance sometimes. Avoidance altogether, like you said, naming my tendency to overwork as a way that I have self-protected. After being aware of my protective tendencies, now I still have them, but I think that I can tell more now, okay, this is not a good time for us to have a conversation. We're not in our core selves here. One of us is triggered, right? So let's take a break and not try to solve this problem right now. Let's give each other some space, or let's go do something fun together and not try to solve this until we can get more into our core selves.
Mm-hmm.
Because I need to really notice and own my reactivity, my anxiety, my fear, my attempt to manage your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that this process of a protective part taking over, like you said, it is a process of like you said, learning to notice it. How do we know that the protective part has taken over? And a couple of things that helped me to get there was to realize this: curiosity and compassion are how my core, and we have some different terms and things for protective parts, but the truest part about us, the spirit that's eternal, that's inside of us, that's the part that reflects the image of God the most. That's the part that receives the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5. That's the part of us that that God can raise up, as we lean into Him more. So those things are all helpful. But yeah, understanding that when I'm not operating, we're talking about difficult conversations, right? when I'm in the midst of a difficult conversation, if I cannot be the degree to which I can operate in curiosity and compassion is the degree to which I'm operating in my true core self that I'm describing here, as opposed to a protective part. Okay. Because the protective part can't have compassion and curiosity. The protective part just wants to protect myself, insulate from the world, do whatever it takes to feel comfortable, to not feel pain, to not be triggered by, past pain, the abandonment, the feelings that we were talking about earlier, and that. So that curiosity and compassion in the midst of a difficult conversation, I mentioned earlier differentiation and the idea that I can let you be you and I can let me be me, right? When you're in, your protective part, I want to say that, or when I'm in those protective parts, there's a saying that those, self-protection triggers self-protection most of the time.
For sure.
So if I come to you with a problem and I don't have curiosity or compassion, what I'm going to get back is not curiosity and compassion. I'm coming at you with the energy that may feel or sound like a character assault or an attack or whatever it is. And what's the result? Self-protection. I don't like your energy. This is too much. This is whatever it is. And so curiosity and compassion so what that looks like is in both directions. If there's a challenging, difficult situation, I can have curiosity and compassion about myself and about you, toward you. If I approach that conversation with curiosity and compassion instead of self-protection, which was, like I said, can come across as judgment, criticism, blame, all of those things. What is the John Gottman's Four Horsemen? Was the criticism, blame, those kind of things. So the curiosity and compassion towards you, in other words, I can let you be in self-protection or in your core self. I can let either of those be okay if I'm properly taking care of myself to the degree where, I'm curious and compassionate towards what your experience is, even in the midst of this conversation. I don't know if that's...
It's so good. And let's just point this out. The best way to approach your spouse when you know they're in a self-protective mode and you feel like I'm in this spirit-led, core self, is to never go to them and say, you're in self-protection, or I think this is a protective part of you that I'm talking to. Like, that's not compassionate or curious. That's judgmental.
Exactly.
And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I have to take radical responsibility for noticing when I have protective parts that are raised up. And
but you said something really important there, though.
What's that?
Was if I come to you and I say, you're really in this self-protection.
Yeah.
Is that really, sometimes
that's not your core. Yeah, no, that's you. That's a part of you that's trying to fix me.
Curiosity and compassion is disguised, when it really has some judgment in there. So I'm talking about percentages here, how much, how much am I operating in self-protection?
Because probably to some degree, there's a little bit of that going on all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're human.
Yeah.
I think we kind of addressed this question. I'll read it anyways, just in case you have anything you want to add. What does it look like to respond from your grounded core self? There's actually 8 C's, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know. I memorized 2.
Compassion, creativity, courage, connectedness, calm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all of these playful, there's
6.
a bunch of P's too. I love the playful one. That's like being in core self. It's like that kingdom of God, like become like a child. All of those pure and innocent qualities. So it doesn't mean that you don't have any strong feelings. but it means that you're not reactive from those strong feelings.
Yeah.
And those strong feelings are not driving the bus, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I usually I just teach mainly those two C's, because the rest of those I can try and act and pretend. I could pretend to be calm, even though,
Yeah.
I look great on the outside, but it's like the duck, that's just paddling like this underneath the water, but
Yes.
everything looks fine. I'm kind of smooth sailing across the water, calm. So, but it is true. Yeah. Being calm, we're talking about a real, true internal state, not that I look calm, but I'm really anxious.
Not that you're performing calm. Yeah.
Exactly right. So yeah. So these other C's, but the curiosity and the compassion. Out of curiosity and compassion, I can realize that someone else is, if it feels like someone is judging me or is, coming at me with character assault or blame, criticism, those kind of things, I can, when in this core self, rather than from a frightened or defensive part, the curiosity and the compassion is toward, okay, what part of it is true that they're talking about? I want to own the truth of whatever really is true. And then I also want to understand that this person has a lot of these feelings, and it's really just, it's a part of them. It really is not the truest spirit inside that core self. So when it comes to us, that has helped me out a lot too. I can reparent. I can be that caregiver of my own parts by telling them that's not who she really is. She really is not judgmental like that. That's just a part of her. She really isn't cold. She really isn't pushy. She really isn't those things. It feels like that and it seems that way. And maybe she's even acting that way right now, but that's just a part. She's trying to protect herself. So I can have that self-talk inside and that. But you were talking about, what does it look like to respond? Oh, yeah.
Well, what you
Mm-hmm.
said made me think of this and how important this is. I hear so many women say, like, I don't even know who he is. Like, how could he do these things? And from a parts model understanding, it's like parts that are using extreme measures to create a false sense of safety and soothing that are acting out. And so if you look at it, and that's not an excuse, it's not okay. But if you look at it that maybe you really did know who he was, you just didn't know this part of him existed. It's a completely different way of thinking about your husband. Like, let's say he's, for the most part, been a great father, great partner. Like, he's been honest in other areas of his life. He's just had this secret sexual life. Not okay. But rather than assuming that he's a completely separate person that I don't know, what if some of the things that you experienced about him actually really were true and were part of his core of who God made him to be? He just has these coping mechanisms coming from these, in IFS world, they're called firefighter parts, that are doing anything and everything to soothe their pain. It's a totally different way of looking at other human beings. Instead of labeling people as this person is all bad and this person's all good, which really, the only one who's all good is God, and the only one who's all bad is the devil. So I think that can be really helpful. Were you going to say anything else about this?
Tons. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots. Yeah. But no, you're right. The monolithic piece that you were talking about, and that makes sense on both sides, for the betrayer and the betrayed, to understand what the betrayal has come from, and I'll just say this, and most of the human beings that we experience out there, it's a blended version of self-protection and the core self. It's all blended. We're constantly scanning our environment for safety. And this is the reality of the way human beings operate. It's outside of our awareness. We really don't know that it's happening. It happens with or without our permission. Okay.
Yeah.
So the self-protective parts do not ask for permission to drive the bus, like we say. They just do it. Okay. And there is a trust that has to be built inside of the system to understand. So the multiplicity, like you talked about, understanding that we're not all bad or all good. That black and white thinking is just an easier way. It actually is one of our parts, trying to understand our world. It's easier because gray ambiguity
does not feel safe.
It doesn't feel safe because we can't make sense of it easily.
Yeah.
Right? And if we can't make sense of it, then we can't protect ourselves, right? We have to have some kind of a solid story. So that's where a lot of the stories we tell ourselves come from. The self-protection creates a story so that we can have some narrative to go by so we know how to protect ourselves. But so yes, the blended state where the man is a wonderful parent. Maybe he's great at work. He's great. Maybe he is a great husband too. And this secret thing that was happening that she had no idea about, it was still a blended state, as he does this type of work and the healing and that core self, more and more of the core self comes out. You see more and more of all of the things that you really liked about him. Most of the time, that's what happens when the self-protection is reduced. And you mentioned different types of parts. The understanding the part of him that is acting out sexually, that Dr. Schwartz calls it a firefighter. I like to name these as image managers and crisis managers. The crisis manager is that firefighter who is basically avoiding pain, doing anything to avoid pain, whatever the pain is, right? And then the image manager, well, that's probably a little bit more obvious, is maintaining a certain image, right? So what she experiences mostly is his image manager blended with his core self, okay? He's putting on an image to her, and she's experiencing parts of the real him, but she does not know about the crisis managers that are happening without, so that's if that's a decent way of understanding it,
It is. She may know about some of his crisis managers, like maybe she knows that he has drinking issues. I mean, It's not uncommon for there to be multiple addictions going on. And the more socially acceptable ones, like drinking, right, maybe are happening in front of her, and she's concerned about that, but is unaware of the sexual piece. You ready for me to move on to our next question?
Yeah, I'll ask it.
Okay.
I don't even know what it is. Let me just read it.
Number 8. Yeah.
How have we learned to offer care to each other's tender places without becoming responsible for healing each other? Yeah, that is a wonderful question. And so we have that, and I think one more before we wrap up here. So you want to start us off with that? How have we learned to offer care for each other's tender places without becoming responsible for healing each other?
I would say that one of my favorite ways would be to ask, like, what do you need, right? But I think the further we get in this work, the more that we are each taking responsibility for discerning what we need. And so, like, if I need you to just hold me, I am more able to notice and ask for that. Sometimes you're coming to me and saying, hey, I just need you to, like, sit here with me, right? And to be settled and still and calm while you allow whatever feelings that need to come up to arise. You tend to want more physical comfort, like for me to, like, hug you when you're in a tender spot. I have a tendency to be like, do not touch me. Like, I need space.
Right.
But I want you to sit next to me. And so that, we've learned this is what's comforting to the other person. But also just knowing that that hour or however long each of us is spending in the morning quiet with God and a cup of coffee and a journal and a Bible that's where the most important work is happening. I'm taking care of myself and you're taking care of yourself. Then when we come together, it's less and less of where I need you to help me with these tender parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, and you mentioned asking what do you need, that I think for you sometimes that that could come from a couple of different places. So the fawner that you mentioned,
Yep.
if you go into that a little bit, self-protection in the way of fawning is if I comfort him, everything will be okay. Like, can you dive into that? What does that look like? Like, if I can fix this, if I can move in and do something with this, if I can give him whatever it is that he wants, then the relationship will stay intact. Isn't that kind of
that's a total thing for me. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Can you feel the difference when I'm in a fawning protective state versus more like spirit, I'm going to be present for you when you're needing comfort? I'm just curious whether you can feel that or not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It depends. Depends on what level of that I'm in as far as dealing with pain from the past and stuff. Yeah. Sometimes I'm 8, man. I'm just 8 years old. Like, I have no idea what's going on. But,
and really, do we need to always assess and evaluate it? It's like if I mean, because in my core self, I really love you, right? And so sometimes I'm going to show up with my self-protective stuff.
Yeah.
And you can still receive comfort and love. Right.
And that's the thing is we need in this particular arena, it's a learning experience that it really is helpful to have that compassion that I mentioned, the curiosity, the compassion enough to like, hey, if you show up with fawning, then later on, of course, I know you have these other parts that judge your fawner parts. And then there's this war that's happening. We call that a parts war within. Okay. The parts are warring against each other, but giving ourselves grace to make those mistakes, and I want to be real clear here. I'm not talking about those crisis managers, giving grace for them to make mistakes. What we want to do is understand what's underneath the crisis manager and pursue that narrative, the truth of what that crisis is trying to put out, that crisis manager is trying to avoid. We actually do need to go back and feel that pain, by the way. But but becoming responsible for healing each other, that's what I was going after with the fawner too, is when that statement that you wrote, right? Caring for each other's tender places without becoming responsible for healing each other. That whole last statement is self-protection, isn't it? If I'm overly responsible for healing you, then that in and of itself is really it's more about me. It's more about protecting me than it is about healing you. Because if you heal, I'm safer.
Right.
That's the narrative.
After betrayal,
anyway.
That's very normal. I mean, the person who's been betrayed wanting the betraying spouse to get help and address these issues because this hurts me. That's normal desire. I think it becomes really easy to slip into, I'm trying to do his recovery work for him.
Yeah.
Because I want this relationship to work and I want our family to stay intact. And that's a very real pain point.
So if we catch ourselves in the rearview mirror with some of these things, just remember those two things, curiosity and compassion, right? Understanding.
Both within and outside towards others.
Towards others, yeah.
Yeah.
And that really is love, curiosity and compassion is love. But towards ourself in the things that we brought to the table, the parts that presented. So, this last question, can you dive into this for the couple listening who cannot imagine feeling connected again? What has given us hope, and what's one small next step each partner can take today?
First, just sometimes the thing that is your impulse to try to get reconnected is actually the opposite of what you need to do. So like for me as a try harder kind of a person, like I'll just do better and I'll, work harder and I'll like cater to every need and make things as easy as possible and silence my voice or whatever my tendency to try to force something is the opposite of what is really needed. What is really needed is radical responsibility for my thoughts and feelings and desires and longings, and releasing the pressure to make that relationship what I want it to be. And learning to cultivate that kind of connection within me, between me and God. Getting the soothing and the love that I need from God instead of trying to force it in my relationship. The thing that's tricky is we both have to do that for it to become something really beautiful and powerful in a marriage.
And if I could say something to the men, something that I've learned, it's not 100% across the board, but in many marriages, in many cases, most cases, when the man steps forward and begins that work himself, it opens up safety for his partner to do the same, right?
Oh yeah.
So in other words,
men are
if you're not
socialized.
safe, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, just that in our culture, it's more acceptable for women to feel their feelings. Not all women do though. But it's more acceptable for women to want connection in our culture, right? And for men, it's not as accepted to feel your feelings, to be vulnerable, to long for closeness. And so that's part of why it's so much more powerful when a man will get to that place, is because he's swimming upstream in this culture to be able to say, actually, I am vulnerable and actually I am terrified. And that doesn't make me a sissy. It makes me human. Men are just as terrified as women. They just act like they're not.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I was, so that's true. And then the other dimension that I was meaning to say was, how, if she is if her protectors are always feeling unsafe because he is unsafe.
Yeah.
And to what degree? To what degree is he unsafe? So I know both parties bring baggage and problems into the marriage, but there's something about when the man goes first and he becomes that safe anchor, she feels safe enough to go into doing her own work, right? Even if they're both unsafe. It goes in both directions. There is something about the man. Just say it again.
Yeah. When
she feels safe because he is becoming safe, right? Then she feels safe enough to do the work. Do you find that to be true?
She doesn't have to use all of her self-protection. Mm-hmm. She can just be at rest and be at peace and sink into her core.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a synergy that is created when two people are willing to take radical responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a real gift.
It really is. And so, the compassion and the curiosity approach in both directions, it, like you said, when both parties are doing the work, that's the other. It's these anything that's not curious or compassionate. Statements like I'm growing faster than her, or when is she gonna, that's judgment. It's not curiosity or compassion.
Not helpful.
When is she gonna start growing? When is she gonna change? What is happening with, like those are self-protective parts. You said it real clearly and beautifully by saying I need to take radical responsibility for what's happening inside of me, right? My outside world and my environment changes when I change. My objective is not to change everything around me. I change first internally, and then the world around me starts to change, right? Our attempts to change other people is control. That's not curiosity or compassion. It's self-protection.
Yeah. Oh, that is a mic drop moment right there. Thanks for listening,
Right on.
friends. We hope you've enjoyed this 2-part series. And if you would take a moment to rate, review, follow the Living Truth podcast, that will give more people access to see our podcast when they do a search for these sensitive topics. We would love to be able to support people on this journey. Thank you so much for listening. And until the next episode, we're holding out hope for you.
Amen.